Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler, and thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. This episode of The Amateur Traveler is brought to you by Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/traveler for your free audiobook download.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 186. Today, the Amateur Traveler goes to Estonia, a land of green forests, old walls, and new energy. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have three news stories for you. The first one, if you've ever had a bad cruise experience, it probably doesn't rival that of a cruise ship in Australia that is still at sea today as I record this. The Pacific Dawn, which left Sydney Monday this week on a 10-night voyage, but hasn't been allowed to dock because some cases of swine flu have broken out on what is now being called the swine flu ship. And then the Bad Idea of the Week award goes to LaGuardia Airport. About 700 yards from the end of the runway of LaGuardia, where thousands of planes take off and land, New York City officials are talking about building a very large garbage transfer station. As you may recall, garbage dumps sometimes attract birds. Didn't we already try this before, mixing birds and airplanes in New York? It didn't work out well, as I recall. And then a good news item, surprisingly, in this downturn, there is a new airline that is starting, that is Jet America, which is going to be targeting cities that don't usually get a major airline. Toledo, Ohio, South Bend, Indiana, Melbourne, Florida, New York, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Lansing, Michigan, and other cities. And the prices on the flights will start from $9 a seat for the first 19 seats on each plane. That airline will start flying August 14th. For links to those three items as well as other news items, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. And before we get into this week's interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, which is audible.com. Audible.com is the internet's leading provider in spoken audio entertainment with over 50,000 titles to choose from. You can sign up for a free trial today and get your free downloadable audiobook by going to audiblepodcast.com/traveler. The most recent book that I've downloaded from audiblepodcast.com and about to start listening to is A Team of Rivals by the historian Doris Kearns Goodwin about Lincoln and his cabinet, which was quoted so much when President Obama took office recently. Remember, get your free downloadable audiobook by going to audiblepodcast.com/traveler. I'd like to welcome to the show Jeanine Barone, who is coming to us from New York City. Jeanine is an independent travel and food writer who's come to talk to us about Estonia. Jeanine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Now, Estonia is not a wildly popular destination. Why should somebody go to Estonia?
Actually, that's the reason they should go, because I tend to gravitate to what I call venues under the radar. And I'm always looking for a surprise, something new and interesting, different and quirky. And Estonia just has so much to offer. I'm very much into the wilderness. I'm very much an outdoors person, and there's so much unspoiled wilderness there. It was quite surprising. But also, as a native New Yorker, I'm very much into city life, and the capital city, Tallinn, is just the most vibrant, creative, young city. It's fabulous. So those are just two very global reasons why people should go to Estonia.
And you said young. You don't mean the city itself is young, but the population is surprisingly young.
I do. The population, yes. Very, very young, very independent, very entrepreneurial. It's the home of Skype. So
right.
How timely is that? They'd been under foreign rule for so long, they just couldn't wait to break out. They only got their independence in 91 from the Russians. And so they're always trying something new and creative, new ventures, new design shops, interesting art and architecture. And I love that kind of thing. I love people who are trying new things, and that's what you find in Tallinn.
And if I go to Tallinn, if I go to Estonia, what's going to surprise me?
Well, I think the art scene, it's a very vibrant art scene. The Kumu Art Museum is beautiful. I mean, the architecture is super contemporary. It's built into a cliff face, and it's got amazing works of art. And they span from the 18th century to World War II and then contemporary artists. And I tend to gravitate towards contemporary. I didn't expect that in a medieval city. It has an amazing coffee culture, all these lovely coffee shops that with fabulous coffee, not the Starbucks thing going on, and wonderful places to drink wine. They're just so atmospheric with wonderful wines from all over the world. Those are just a few of the surprising things in Tallinn. And in Estonia, as I was saying, the wilderness I found surprising. I didn't realize we would drive on all these beautiful roads that were completely forested on either side, completely unspoiled. That's very unusual. Usually you see there's resorts and overdevelopment facing the highway, and you didn't find a lot of that.
And how much time should I plan if I want to do a reasonable trip to Estonia? I'm an American, so I don't get months and months of vacation.
No, you don't need months. Estonia is small. It's only as big as New Hampshire and Vermont, but actually smaller than New Hampshire and Vermont combined. So that's pretty small. I would spend a week to 10 days, and you could see so many of the beautiful venues that Estonia has to offer. And I would really spend several days in Tallinn, at least 3 to 4 days.
Any particular place or places you would recommend to stay in Tallinn?
Oh, yeah. I have my two favorite. They're both very upscale, but they're lovely. One is called Three Sisters, and it's called Three Sisters for the reason that it's a hotel or an inn that's built from three merchant houses that date to the 14th century. It's just very atmospheric. It's got a wonderful wine cellar. So if you stay there at night and you have dinner there, I mean, you don't have to leave. You go down to the basement. It's got this great wine cellar with vaulted ceilings. You could sit in an alcove and drink wine. I was there by myself, and I found it just fabulous. The rooms are wonderful with rugged beam ceilings and clawfoot tubs. Every room is different. So that would be one place to stay. And the other place, also fabulous, is called the Telegraph Hotel. It's called the Telegraph for an obvious reason. It's in the old 19th century building that was a telegraph building. They have a great spa with all kinds of interesting massages and other treatments there, a Tibetan massage, and they've got a great restaurant called Tchaikovsky with all kinds of interesting dishes, crepes with smoked eel and sole with ginger sauce. So Tallinn's got an amazing culinary scene there, which is also quite surprising.
Interesting. And is that Estonian cuisine, or are they doing a lot of international cuisine?
If you were to say Estonian cuisine, it almost would be what you'd expect to see in Russia, very much meat and potatoes. I happen to be what I call a conditional vegetarian. In other words, when I'm not reviewing a restaurant, I don't eat meat. I eat fish, but if I'm traveling, I'm not going to just be eating broccoli. However, Estonian food is very heavy in all kinds of meats and potatoes, very starchy. But what they do in Tallinn is you're combining all kinds of cuisines from around the world. So you'll have like an Asian fusion going on. You'll have French cuisine. It's very, very European and international. A lot of sushi. You have a fusion Indian restaurant. So you could expect to not be disappointed there, even if you came from New York and you were a native New Yorker and you're used to all kinds of cuisine from around the world, you drop into Tallinn and be completely satisfied.
And you mentioned to me that there's a real interesting restaurant in Tallinn that people should check out.
Yeah, I mean, Tallinn has a lot of fabulous restaurants, but one that I'm just very fond of, its name is one letter. It's the letter O with the two dots, the diacritic mark over it, and it's pronounced It serves European cuisine, but what's so amazing is so much of the food is locally sourced, and I'm very much a locavore. And so the blueberries, the deer, wild boar, the mushrooms, it's all local. And that's something that I find just lovely to find a place like that. It's very upscale. It's very well known for its cuisine. So I would definitely, if you want to splurge one night, that's the place.
Interesting. And I should ask you, as long as we're talking about food, on the other nights when we're trying to save up our money to go to what is street food in Tallinn?
Oh, you're going to think I'm so snooty, but I didn't eat street food. I was always eating at those kind of places. Actually, though, there's one place that's not in that price range. I would not at all call it street food, but it's a fabulous Italian restaurant and very well respected, and it's called Contravento. It's in the Old Quarter. You may not think an Italian restaurant in Tallinn is going to be good. This is amazing Italian. I mean, I had octopus there, and they have great Parma ham. I would try that.
Okay. And what are the highlights of Tallinn? You mentioned, for instance, the art museum. If you had 3 pictures that you took that really represented Tallinn to you, what would those 3 pictures be?
Well, it's the old town, the medieval quarter. It's just lovely. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I happen to be very fond of those places because they're protected from development. So
Sure.
I would wander the old town. That's where I stayed. Those 2 hotels are both in the old town. Wander all the cobbled lanes and go to all the viewpoints to see the spires. I mean, there's amazing churches. Walk around the base of the old fortification. I mean, there's still some of them left. There are certain streets that do not have a lot of shops on them. And if you close your eyes and open them, you feel like, well, maybe you've been transported back to the medieval era. And I really like that. Another thing you should do in Tallinn is go to the waterfront, to where the beaches are. There's windsurfing. What's interesting for the people of Estonia is when they were taken over by the Soviet Union, they were not allowed to go to the waterfront. It was off limits because they thought the people would try to escape by sea. So the waterfront is not as popular as it should be because you have that tradition up until 91 that it was no-no zone. And it's being totally redeveloped, particularly for 2011 when Tallinn is expected to be the European cultural capital for that year. You'll see a lot of development around the waterfront. So I would do that. And then I would also go to the open air museum. It's a museum short drive from the center of the city, and you'll see representative dwellings and windmills from all over the country and from eras past. So thatched roofed houses and that sort of thing, and old barns. It really gives you a flavor of what was the rest of Estonia like.
Interesting. Now, you've been to Estonia a number of times.
I've been twice.
You've been twice.
Right.
Now, what do you wish you had known the first time you went there?
Well, I buy a ton of guidebooks when I go anywhere. I don't buy one. I look at them all and I compare notes. And so I'm the meticulous researcher, as you need to do, because I'm a travel writer and I actually
Sure.
was on assignment both times. And I just don't think that the guidebooks made a big deal about, as I mentioned before, the art and design scene in Tallinn. They talk a lot about its history, and that's certainly understandably so. But I would have wanted to know more about all of the interesting shops. There are very cool clothing shops, and I'm no shopper, but these were very creative shops. You have one that's called Reetaus. That's Reetaus, and they have eco clothes made by a woman. She designs all the clothes, and they're just fabulous. They're very wearable. And then you have another shop. It's called New Nordic, N-U, and then Nordic with a K. And it's kind of like a motley crew of very curiously designed objects. It might be a wool helmet with a visor or an eye chart or interesting jewelry, and they're all by local artists. So the art and design scene is something I had no idea the extent of it.
Interesting. And you talked about that chapter in the guidebook that's all about the history. It sounded like, from what we were talking about previously, that that's really geared more at me than it is at you. I want to know that it was part of the Hanseatic League or something like that.
Right. I mean, it's good to know that too,
Sure.
Of course, because you know a land by its history. I always get guides wherever I go to learn about the history, but my thing is always looking for something surprising or
Absolutely.
the unexpected. It might be an unexpected cuisine. Another thing I really love about Tallinn is I'm very much a chocoholic. Anybody who listens to my tweets or watches my tweets on Twitter knows I'm a chocoholic. And they have amazing chocolate shops with homemade truffles. And they also have fabulous pastries, some of the best I've seen. So two of the best places I love is Bonaparte, where they have red currant tarts and that sort of thing. And it's in a very, very old building from centuries ago. And the other is called Chocolateria. And you go down this outdoor courtyard. You can sit inside if you want, but if the weather's good, you sit outside. And you have homemade truffles with chili or horseradish. I mean, very curious chocolate delights. So I like that too.
And what's the best day you've had in Estonia?
See, I was there this last time for a particular assignment to interview an architect. And I think my best day was interviewing her and walking the city with her to see what she enjoyed. It was Tallinn through her eyes. And she showed me all the best things, and then we parted ways. I took to her footpath. But two other things I need to mention, because Estonia is noted for its islands off the west coast. There's thousands, there's about 1,500 of them. And the two islands I most fell in love with, one is Muhu, that's M-U-H-U, and the other is Kinu, that's K-I-H-N-U. And these are just gorgeous, unspoiled islands, particularly Kinu, because its culture is also a UNESCO site. The women still wear the traditional skirts with the long vertical stripes. They make them there. I stayed at one of the farm stays, no hotels. We visited the place where the locals still make the skirts. They drive around in little motorcycles with sidecars. They're kind of like from the Soviet era. So we went putt-putting around, looked at an old 19th century lighthouse, and the glaciers had come through this area eons ago. And so there are all these huge glacial erratics, which are big, big, big boulders. It's a very unusual land. It's stepping back in time. And Muhu Island is just a beautiful island. It would be wonderful for biking. I didn't have time to bicycle there. I'm a big cyclist. But I stayed at this lovely property called Nami Namasti, which is N-A-M-I and then N-A-M-A-S-T-E. And it's a woman who owns the property. It's an old fisherman's property. And she's from Finland.
Just over the strait there.
Right. And she started a cooking school in Finland, and she bought this property, and now it's a B&B inn where she offers cooking classes in Italian cuisine. And her chef is from Italy, and they have an outdoor pizza oven. And this is just one of the best places I've ever stayed at. They have a hot tub that's underneath old apple trees. The president of Estonia stayed in one of the rooms. I mean, this is a precious place. She has a lavender garden and other herbs growing there that they put into the food. If I go back to Muhu Island, I would definitely stay there.
And you mentioned doing a lot of research before you went. What did you find to be the best resource for planning a trip to Estonia?
Well, that's the thing. When I plan a trip, there is no best.
Single resource? Mm-hmm.
Right. There's no best resource because I really compare notes.
Okay.
You have to realize there are not that many guidebooks on Estonia. There's a rough guide. There's a Lonely Planet that includes Latvia and Lithuania. And then there's the Thomas Cook guide. I looked at all of them. The Thomas Cook is very lightweight. You could bring it with you. It's a thin book. It has a lot of highlights. But one book series I liked very much because it actually did talk a lot about the culinary scene and the art and design. The music scene is fabulous in Tallinn, is the Hedonist Guide to Tallinn. Hedonist guides, you can go to their website and they have them for Madrid, for Barcelona, all the big cities. And I was surprised that they included Tallinn. It's a little black book and it comes with a little,
Well, that
gold,
seems appropriate.
yeah, of course, a little gold bookmark inset. And I use that a lot and it's a really good reference.
And more towards the cuisine of the area, or what do we get out of the Hedonist Guide? Because that's not a guide I'm familiar with.
Yeah, most people are not. It's for anything to do with food, with drink, with art. There are galleries in there, shopping. There are the bars, the nightlife. So really, it's quite a bit. It obviously is not talking about fortification walls, okay? But it's anything that would delight the senses, that even if you were a novice traveler, you want to know a great coffee bar. You want to know a great place to enjoy wine, or a place at night that has a really good music scene. I find the recommendations there quite good. I've used them for a lot of other cities I've gone to, and I like it a lot.
And as long as we're talking about nightlife, and have mentioned that it's a particularly young culture, what are some of the hot spots for nightlife?
Well, I have to say, because I was working all day, I didn't frequent the hotspot because you can only do so much. And
Sure.
At night, I was going to a lot of the wine bars and the restaurants. I was eating quite late. For example, a hotspot for me, I love a fabulous wine bar. So the Gloria Wine Bar is a place I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you wanted a really cool scene that's kind of very futuristic in terms of its interior decor, it's a place called Stereo, and it's really bright and very whitewashed and lots of TV monitors, plasma screens all over the place. So that's a place you could hang out. It's really fun. But I just couldn't be going all day and checking out the culinary scene at night and the wine bars and still have time to do dancing and things. A limited amount of time.
Well, that's okay. I'm old enough to have teenage kids who are telling me that I'm not cool enough to go to the hotspots anyway.
Well, I do try to hit hotspots, but on this trip and the last one, I've just had so much work to do. It just didn't work out.
How would you complete this sentence? You really know you're in Estonia when what?
When you walk down the cobbled lanes adjacent to the fortification walls and you look up and you see these walls that go back to centuries ago, that's Estonia for me.
Okay.
And that's Tallinn. I mean, Tallinn is Estonia. But in terms of wilderness, when you leave Tallinn, you know you're in Estonia because you're on these forest-draped roads. There's just so many of them with no traffic. It's just fabulous coming from New York, pine trees and no traffic.
And I realize we never really put Estonia on a map. We assumed that the people who are listening to the Amateur Traveler are intelligent enough to know that Estonia is one of the Baltic states, but we really didn't say that. And I assumed that maybe 1 in 10 Americans could put it on a map. What do you wish that Americans or people outside of Estonia knew about Estonia?
Well, I think they should see that it's as vibrant a city as any of the other cities in Europe that we associate with vibrancy. For example, I specialize in Madrid, and everyone associates Madrid with fabulous art and fabulous cuisine. When you say Estonia, I don't think that comes to mind. I think they think it's next to Russia. It was part of the Soviet Union and not much going on there. And I want them to think that this is a vibrant town, very entrepreneurial, full of young people that are just moving forward at very high speeds to really put the past aside and just very creative.
Excellent. Last question. If you had to summarize Estonia in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Okay, creative,
Okay.
enchanting, and these are 2 words, but they go together, forested and fun.
Okay, we'll give you that. We'll give you 4 words. Jeanine, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people read more of your work, more of your travel writing?
Well, I write for everyone from National Geographic Traveler to Travel and Leisure, but I have a blog. It's jthetravelauthority.com.
And you're also on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter as J Creature Travel, like a creature, just the letter J, so J Creature Travel. I tweet all the time. I tweet while I'm away as well. And I'll be going to Turkey, Spain, and Portugal for a month in June.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
For Internet resources, I have one resource for you today. It is not a site that I have tried, but it's one that caught my eye called Untours. A different way to travel, they say, brought to you by a different kind of travel company. The thing that caught my eye about it is it seems to focus in on more close to the location kind of stays, private flats, farmhouses, cottages, rather than on hotels and resorts. So you might check that out. It's untours.com. If you've had a good or a bad experience with them, please let me know and we'll pass that along. In news from the community, I have a question for you. I have gotten invited on a all-expense-paid trip as a travel blogger, travel podcaster to the Yucatan Peninsula, to Cozumel, a short trip coming up in June. I am thinking that it's okay with me to take it as long as you know that I'm getting paid to do it. Anything I write, could it be influenced by the fact that it's a free trip? I will certainly try and write the truth about it, but I'm interested in what you think about that. Does that sound like I'm selling out to you, or does that sound like something that you think is fine? So let me know about that. Also, I'm doing some traveling this year, and I'm interested in potentially doing some meetups in different parts of the country. I'm interested in doing a meetup locally in San Francisco sometime in June. Let me know if you'd be interested. I'm interested in doing a meetup in Chicago in the last weekend of July, and I'm interested in doing a meetup in New York City on, I think, December 22nd. Because I would like to meet some of you and hear your travel stories. If that's something that sounds of interest to you, then first I would encourage you to get on the mailing list, because I'll be using that for coordinating these sorts of things. Or you could drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. If you don't subscribe to the video show, you might be interested in knowing that I just put out a show about London featuring the London Eye, and you can find that at amateurtraveler.com. With that, I think we'll wrap up this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any comments, feel free to go to amateurtraveler.com and comment on this show, or drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com, or on Twitter, send something to @Chris2X. I monitor everything that's said, even if I don't follow you. And as always, thanks so much for listening.